Well, we're going to continue our series this morning, and we've been working through a series called Strongholds. And last week we took a brief break from that, and we talked, like I mentioned, about the guy being lowered through the roof and his friends carrying the weight of him. And we've been working our way through a series called Stronghold. We told lots of different topics. We talked about the stronghold of religion, the stronghold of the past, the stronghold of the tongue, the stronghold of complaining. We talked about sex and relationships and how if we get those things out of order, those can be a stronghold in our life. We talked about the stronghold of depression a couple of weeks ago. And then we talked about things about how do we avoid strongholds. We talked about how worship helps us to break strongholds, how the importance of guarding our heart helps us avoid strongholds. We talked about living in holiness, and we talked about how in the book of Lamentations that a whole 4 or 5 chapters is dedicated to someone lamenting to God, telling God how bad it is and how hard it is, but how in the middle of Lamentations there's this little bit of hope where he remembers what God has done for him. And sometimes it's okay to lament. If you're having a hard week, a hard month, why don't you go for a walk in the woods and just yell out to God and say, God, why has this happened to me? But at some point, you've got to stop and remember what God has done. And today we're going to be moving on, and we're going to be staying in this series just for a few more weeks. But did anyone know that life can be really busy? You know what? Even people who are retired, when you talk to them, they're like, life is so busy. And you think, how did you ever work 40 hours a week previously? Your life is so busy now. But life just is a way to be busy. Not only that, but many people get stuck in jobs that drain us. I mean, there's some people here that you love your job, and that's great. But there's a lot of people that are stuck in jobs that really they don't like, that drain them. And they count down until the weekend. You see it all over Facebook every Friday. It's Friday, and Fridays mean nothing to me because we work all weekend usually. But everyone's counting down till Fridays. I can hardly wait till Friday. And then when Friday gets here, Saturday noon comes, and they're already dreading Monday morning. It's all like they only did was sleep, and they wake up and they're like, oh, it's going to be Monday in 36 hours. And you see it all over Facebook. Yeah, it's Friday. And 12 hours later, oh, it's going to be Monday soon. Like it's a surprise. That happens every single week. And we know that parenting is hard. Did you notice? Did you notice that marriage is hard? That money is tight? That stress levels are high? That we are anxious about tomorrow? And then we look on Facebook and we think that everyone's life is more perfect than ours. Then we get some time off, and when we have a day off, we have a million errands to do. And so you don't even get a chance to relax because you got to run, you got to go to the bank, you got to go here, you got to get a haircut because you've been trying to get a haircut for 6 weeks. And then you got to go here and you got to go there. Then you got to drive your kids all over the world. Not just Kent County, the world. And that's what it feels like. And our hobbies get forgotten, the things that we like, and then we end up being people who are frustrated, and we concentrate on our weaknesses rather than concentrate on our strengths. Just think about it. How much time do you spend on improving the gifts that you already have? Probably none. But how much time do you spend wallowing on the things that you're not good at? Lots. The last church that I pastored in, great church, great pastor, and he definitely, I mean, this is going to come no surprise to you, but he definitely saw some things in me that he thought I needed to work at. That's about the nicest way that I could probably put it, okay? And so we would have staff meetings, and every staff meeting, he's such a nice man. He was so kind. And so he would say things like, you know, Troy, we should really work on whatever it was. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is really me. And for the last 3 years I was there, we spent eventually every staff meeting working on my weaknesses. And because I think he knew that I was going to move on eventually, and he was trying to help prepare me for something else, and all those things. And those things were good. His intentions were good. But at the end of the 3 years, I found myself being really discouraged and thinking that I sucked at everything. And the reason for that it wasn't his intention, but I had spent so much time thinking and talking about my weaknesses that I had felt like I didn't have any strengths or I didn't have any gifts that God had given me. We all do that. We spend so much time thinking about what we're not good at. Oh, I wish I was a better house cleaner. Oh, I wish I could make more money. Oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. What about the gifts that God has given you? I really believe that if we worked on the things that we were good at, the gifts that God gave us, that it would actually break strongholds in our life. But the problem is we get tied up in the negative things. We concentrate on our weakness. And I don't know why it is, but most times we build lives that seem to drain us. And then we wonder why we're tired, frustrated, and unhappy. Because we're not using our gifts that God gave us. And those things just drain us. It's sort of like budgeting money. If you're at home and you have a budget, and when you save $1, you deposit it in your savings account, you've made a deposit. And if you spend $1, you've made a withdrawal. And what happens when you make more withdrawals than deposits? You're broke. And if you keep doing that, you'll eventually be bankrupt. If you spend more than you make, and it's the same thing with us in our gifts. If we concentrate on the negative, and we don't make deposits by spending time exercising the gifts that God has given us, we become bankrupt spiritually, emotionally, even physically. Because we become so negative in thinking, and we just make withdrawal after withdrawal. Our work withdrawals. Everyone is withdrawing from us, and we become bankrupt. We're broke. So what I need is 15 people. Okay, really quickly, I need 15 people to come up and help me and line up to the front. Okay, so Fern will start the way. He was raising his hand up really big there. All right, so 15 people, just come up. Don't raise your hand. We need 15 people. Just run up here. I won't make it. One of the people that I made carry Winston around last week, he contacted me on Monday, and he said, you know what? I'm still feeling the weight of that. Well, maybe you should get in shape then. So anyway, no, I didn't say that. All right, so what we're going to do is 15 people. This is good. Come on, 16, whatever. So this is what I want us to do now. This end over here, you're going to have to talk. I should have probably told you that before. This end over here, you're going to have more time to think about this. Okay? So you guys are going to have an advantage. So what I would like you to do, just as fastly, is that a word? Just as fastly. There's a guy that public speaking is not his gift. All right. Okay. She can talk though, I'll tell you. All right. So this is what I want, just as quick as you can, and what I need everyone past Andre to do, okay, is to your first thing that pops into your head. Your first thing. So if you like nothing, then nothing pops in your head. All right, but try to think about it. What is one gift you think God has given you? Faith. Strength. Patience. Yeah. Love. Music.
My wife.
And he should thank God every day. Go ahead.
Love.
Leadership.
Family. Vision.
Caring for others. Family.
Grace.
Hope.
Okay. So you guys did good. Now don't move. Now be honest, okay? Andre, you answered really quick. Everyone else, you kind of had a chance to say, okay? But when I first asked the question, often when you ask it, people can't have a hard time to come up with one thing, unless it's very obvious. Okay, music. Okay, love. Guy couldn't come up with one. There's many. But often we struggle. But if I would have started here and said, okay, tell me 5 things you're not good at, Andre would have said, just 5? Exactly. Like, can I get a piece of paper? It would have been much easier. Now, everybody did good at naming a gift, but you had time to think about it. If I could have asked you all individually, we would have had a lot more geese than we did everybody else. But it's so hard because, you guys and girls can sit down, but it's so hard because we built lives that are so busy, we don't use the gifts that God has given us. Because we live in a world that seems rush, rush, rush. We think of the negative, we don't concentrate on the gifts that you have. Everybody in this room has biblical gifts. Biblical gifts. Not just gifts of family, and those things are good, or your wife. But they have biblical gifts that God has given to you. And when I say that, if I ask the same 15 people, what's a biblical gift God has given you? We probably would have got 10 answers. But I believe every single person in this room, God has given you a gift for you to use to serve Him and to serve His body. Everyone in this room is a gift. Most people don't know what that gift is, or if you do know, you don't use it, because we've built a life that's so hectic. And because we don't operate in our gifts, the truth is we get held back in our walk with God. Because we just get frustrated building a life that is tense and stressful. The Bible talks a lot about gifts. And there's 4 spots in the Bible, 3 spots in the Bible that really talk about gifts. And you can write these down. We're just going to touch on one of the spots today. But in Romans 12, talks about gifts. Talks about the gift of exhortation or the gift of encouragement. And there's some of you in this room that you have that gift. There's talks about the gift of giving. Talks about the gift of leadership, the gift of mercy, the gift of prophecy, the gift of service, and the gift of teaching in Romans chapter 12. It talks about these gifts. And there's people in this room, definitely, that there's people in this room that have one or maybe even more of these gifts. And the Spirit of God has given you those gifts. There's gifts in 1 Corinthians 12, the gift of administration, the gift of being an apostle, discernment, faith, healing, help, knowledge, miracles, prophecy, teaching, tongues, interpretation of tongues, and wisdom. And then Ephesians 4, there's the apostle, the evangelist, the pastor, the prophet, and the teacher. And then there's other gifts that are talked about in the Bible. The gift of celibacy. That means the gift of not having sex. Nobody wants that gift. The gift of hospitality. The gift of, there's people that actually have the gift of martyrdom, where they gave their life for the cause of Christ. The gift of being a missionary. And there's people in the Bible that actually volunteered to be poor. It was their gift. And there's all of these gifts, these biblical gifts that we have within the body, because the Bible tells us we do, but the truth is we don't use them most times. Maybe because we haven't learned, we don't know how. Part of the reason is just maybe we're shy, we don't really know. But we live lives that are always going in circles, never stopping to be who God has called you and I to be. And when we build a life that goes in circles, it's a life that tends to make us be held back. Because we're always doing things maybe that frustrate us, or the things that just have to be done. But what is your gift? In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, We mentioned these gifts already, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it talks about spiritual gifts. It says in in chapter 12, verse 1, it says this: "Now about the gifts of the Spirit, brothers and sisters, I do not want you to be uninformed. You know that when you were pagans, somehow or other, you were influenced and led astray by the mute idols. Therefore, I want you to know that no one who is speaking in the Spirit of God says, 'Jesus be cursed,' and no one can say, 'Jesus be Lord,' except by the Spirit." It says this in verse 4. "There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them or gives them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work." There's all of these gifts, and it's the Spirit that gives them to us. But I really believe that we are held back in our Christian walk because we don't use those gifts. And then it says this in verse 12. It says, "Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but it has many parts from one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized, one Spirit, so as to form one body." So we all become saved to form one body, this body. Whether Jews or Gentiles, doesn't matter what your backstory is, doesn't matter if you were slave or free, we've all been given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. And this is such a cool part in the Bible. It says this: "Now if the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And for the ear to say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' it would not be for that reason to stop being part of the body. It is the whole body where an eye. Where would the sense of hearing be?" If your whole body was an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body was an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts of the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If you're all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts but one body. So it's comparing us to an actual physical body. That everybody in this room represents a part of a physical body. And they all make up the body of Christ that operates in the gifts. And part of me really been convicted about this over the last numerous months is that usually on a Sunday, we have, a worship team play, somebody speak, but really few people get a chance to use their gifts. And maybe you have gifts today. There are many gifts, and the Spirit gives them to us. But the question is, why don't we use those gifts? And I wonder if it's because of the life that we've built, that we just feel drained or feel discouraged because we feel actually spiritually bankrupt. What is your gift or gifts? I remember when I was 11 years old. That was 32 years ago. And I remember, I think it was 32 years ago. I remember I was living in Canning, Nova Scotia. And I remember my dad was speaking, and he was speaking about gifts. And I remember this. And I remember as part of his sermon, I remember he called me up and he gave me this box. In the box, there was nothing in the box. It was just for an illustration. But he was in the sermon, he was giving me the box, and it was the gift of wisdom. And I remember it, I was 11. And it was part of this illustration. And I really believed that that day, that not him giving me a box, but I really believed that day that the Spirit of God gave me the gift of wisdom as He would see fit. Because He gives the gifts. And we need to use the gifts that He's given us. Or are we going to be people who bury our gifts, our treasures? And I remember that. I was 11 years old. I remember him calling me up, giving me the gift of wisdom. And I really felt that something was placed on me that day, not just through that illustration, but the Spirit of God working through my father to me. See, the Spirit gives gifts, and the Spirit, I believe, has given every single person in this room a gift. And you say, Troy, what do I do with this gift? Just a few things I want to touch on this morning. The number one thing you need to do is stay as close as you can to the giver of the gift. Because even a gift given can be abused. And we see it all the time. People were given the gift of prophecy, and then they use it for their own gain. They say, let's move on. We need to stay as close as we can to the giver of the gift. In a day and age where much is fake, there is nothing like someone who just has a real authenticity or a real close, loving relationship with God. You need to know that fake gifts do not change God, change people's lives. God does. Anyone can make up a prophecy that sounds cool, but a prophecy that is born out of an intimacy with God changes the course of people's lives. And I remember that day when he departed the gift of wisdom. And I was just a young punk, walked up there trying to look cool. And I remember walking back to my seat knowing something had happened that day. Anyone can serve people dinner, but someone who is close to the heart of God will have the exact timing to change the course of someone's life with the gift of hospitality. See, anybody can serve dinner. Even me. Barely. But anybody can just say, I got to. But when you listen and you're close to the heart of God, and they say, and God says to you, you know what, you need to either bring dinner to this person or invite this person to your house, and you listen to the prompting of the Spirit, and intimacy with God changes everything. Anyone can serve dinner. Anybody can pray for healing. But if you walk close to Jesus and obey, people are healed. Stay close to the giver of the gift. Anyone can walk in faith, but if you're close to the giver of the gift, your faith will shape the course of your life and your family's life. Anyone can just go through the motions and do the right thing and go to church and say the right things. You've got to be close to the giver of the gift. You've got to read, you've got to pray, you've got to listen. So much of our prayer is talking, and I think if God could say one word, he would say, shut up. Listen to me. I have given you a gift. Let me tell you how to use it. There is many, many, many people in this room. You have the gift of hospitality, and you haven't had someone to your house in years. You have buried a gift that God has given you. There's many people in this room that you have the gift to teach, but you won't teach because your schedule is too different. I can't lead a small group because there's many people who have the gifts of hospitality or working with children, or the gift of discernment, or the gift of encouragement, or the gift of administration. And you ask yourself the question, these are gifts that God has given to me. Well, now what? Number 2, practice using those gifts. Gifts need to be exercised. Gifts are like muscles. Believe it or not, I have muscles. And gifts are like muscles. They need to be exercised. And when you exercise them, they become stronger and you become better at that gift. Don't be afraid to fail. Many of us don't use the gifts God has given us because we say, listen, if God tells me something and I go to say it, and what if I think I heard God and I got it wrong? But our gifts need to be exercised. If you've got the gift of hospitality, you need to exercise that gift. Don't be afraid to fail. Number 3, and this is where it gets challenging for us. Number 3, build a life where you can use your gift. Many of us have built a life where it's impossible to use the gift God has given us. Because we couldn't squeeze 5 minutes out of the week we're currently living. Or $5. But we've built a life where we can use our gifts. You see people posting online all the time. They're saying it right now. They're saying, oh, well, we'll see you in May. Hockey season's starting for my kids. Listen, your kid is not Cindy Crosby. Let me tell you. Let me be the first to tell you. And you can sell yourself down that road. You can. Or you can make time in your life to know the giver of the gift and to build a life that you can use your gifts. We're doing something in November. It's called House Church. And we're going to be starting it up. We're going to be picking a location, a different location every time. And we're going to be doing, it's called House Church. We're going to be gathering whoever wants to come. We're going to be having music. We're going to be having communion together. We're going to be a time of sharing. And we're going to have a time where people can use their gift. Now, don't let that freak you out. Because God is a God of order. And our gifts are meant to be used. So you're saying to me today, Troy, that I'm going to have to stop doing things in order to make time to use my gifts. Yeah, probably. Number 4, make a plan and find a spot to use your gifts. Some of you are using your gifts at work. That is great. But some of you have gifts that the church needs that you are not using. Maybe just the gifts you use in your house, and those things are great. You know, I see often in a house, we'll have someone who's really good with money and someone who's not so good with money. And inevitably, for some odd reason, the person that's not good with money is usually the one taking care of the money. I don't know why. We were trapped to these gender roles that way. Maybe we grew up with, but maybe we should use the person who has the gift to operate in that gift. Every weekend in the market, every weekend I go to the market here in Bouctouche. And I missed a couple weekends, but usually I try to go. And I try to be there around 1 o'clock to help Penny pack up the car. And I hope I don't embarrass this person, but every week, my new friend Aaron sells vegetables. And at the end of the market, he packs up his vegetables in a basket. And then he takes his basket around to all the other vendors. And he trades with them. So he'll trade vegetables for cupcakes. I mean, that's a deal. I mean, you make that deal every day of the week, don't you? But he trades vegetables for cupcakes. Or he'll trade vegetables for other things. And then he leaves with mostly an empty thing of vegetables, but then he has bread and meat and whatever else he's traded for that week. And for me, this is a picture of how we're supposed to use our gifts. You've been given a certain amount of things that you're entrusted with. And those things are gifts. If he takes those gifts home, no matter how much his family loves vegetables, most of those gifts are going to go in the compost. Most of those vegetables are going to go in the compost. Because you can't eat 5 pounds of lettuce. I don't even know if you should eat that much lettuce. But instead of just taking it home and having it compost, he goes and shares his gift. And really, that's what we're called to do. So maybe you're here and you have this gift of discernment. Discernment is the ability to judge well. And I don't mean judge like, that's not a nice shirt. That's not what I mean. I love your shirt. It's the ability to judge if something is from God or not from God. Or if something is good or almost good, but there's something not quite right about it. Have you ever met someone that you thought something's not quite right? That's discernment. That's knowing what is right. And God gives you that gift. And if you have the gift of discernment, this is an example of the basket and the vegetables. If Eileen has the gift of discernment, and she sees her friend Sally doing something that she knows is not good, if she hoards her gift, or doesn't go to her friend and say, Sally, you know what, I've been thinking and praying, and do you think maybe, have you thought about this? And just say, you know what, I'm just here to help. And we can use our gifts. Number one, stay close to the giver. Number two, practice using the gifts. Number three, build a life where you can use your gifts. Number four, make a plan and find a spot to use your gifts. Number five, in closing, never stop growing in your gift or gifts. Gifts develop and so should you. Gifts grow and so should you. As you are faithful with the little things, God will entrust you with big things. You need a church. We need each other. The body of Christ is where we are to use our gifts as well as other places. The church is where you can grow your gift. House church, small groups, ministry to youth. There's all these areas to use your gift. Number 6, you need to understand that using your gifts fills your spirit. The problem is we spend all of our time doing things that drain us. But using your gifts and God using you actually fills you. You make deposits, you make withdrawals. You make deposits, you make withdrawals. Because if you just withdraw, you'll be bankrupt. My prayer as we worship together today is that you would allow God to speak to you about your gift. And allow God to tell you how you can use that gift to serve people in His church. And then make a plan. Because if you don't make a plan, it will not happen. If you think, you know what, I believe that God has given me the gift of hospitality, then make a plan to use that gift. If you believe that God has told you something, that God has given you the gift of discernment to know the difference between what is right and is almost right, then exercise that gift. Not what your preference is, but between what is right in God's eyes. My prayer for us today that we would stay close to the giver of the gift. That we would practice using our gifts. That we would build a life where you can use your gift. That means some things are going to have to go. Make a plan to find a spot to use your gifts. Never stop growing because God has more gifts and greater gifts. And remember that using your gifts fill your spirit rather than just drain your spirit. So we're going to worship together today. So why don't we stand together?